Ask a historian when the worst time to be alive was, and you will start an argument. Not the deadliest war, not the biggest number, the worst time to simply be a person, where the sky changed, the food ran out, and nobody could tell you why. We are counting down 4 of them, and the winner is not the Black Death. It is a single year, and it very nearly took the world with it. First, the rules, because worst is a slippery word. We are not ranking by total deaths. That would just reward the modern era for having more people in it. We are ranking by how bad your personal odds were and how little you could do about them. What share of your world died, how long it lasted, whether there was anywhere to run, and one more thing that matters more than you would expect, whether anybody knew what was happening. By those rules, the most destructive event in human history only comes in at number 4. 1914 to 1945, the 31 years that broke the world. Some historians treat this as one long event with a ceasefire in the middle. It opens in 1914 with a war nobody expected to last past Christmas. Instead, it lasted 4 years, and it introduced industrial killing to the human race. Machine guns, poison gas, and artillery that could flatten a village from 10 miles away. Around 20 million people died, and an entire generation of young men was gutted. Then, in 1918, before the war was even over, a new flu appeared, and it did something influenza is not supposed to do. Normally, flu is dangerous to the very old and the very young. This one struck healthy adults in their 20s and 30s at astonishing rates. It traveled on troop trains and troop ships into every crowded camp on Earth. It reached the Arctic, remote Pacific islands, and villages that had never seen a foreigner. In under 2 years, it infected roughly a third of everyone alive. Estimates of the dead run from 50 to 100 million, more than the war it traveled with. The survivors got 11 years of peace. Then the world economy collapsed in 1929. In some countries, a quarter of all workers lost their jobs and stayed jobless for a decade. And that hunger and humiliation is exactly what fed the thing that came next. The Second World War killed somewhere between 70 and 85 million people. For the first time in history, most of the dead were civilians rather than soldiers. Cities were deliberately targeted from the air. Whole populations were deported and murdered. 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, along with millions of other targeted people, and it ended with 2 cities destroyed by a single bomb each, which left humanity holding a weapon capable of actually finishing the job. So why is this only number 4? Because in raw numbers, it is the worst thing we have ever done, but your odds were still decent. Most people in most places came through it. There were hospitals, food aid, and governments trying to help. And crucially, everyone knew exactly what was happening, who was doing it, and roughly when it might end. Number 3, the Americas after 1492. This one rarely gets called a disaster because we file it under exploration instead. The Americas had been separated from Europe, Asia, and Africa for thousands of years. That meant no exposure to smallpox, measles, influenza, or typhus, and no immunity to any of them. Before Europeans arrived, these continents were full. Tenochtitlan was bigger than any city in Spain. The Inca ran a road network longer than the Roman empires, and they did it without the wheel. Then the diseases came, and they did not travel at the speed of ships. They ran ahead of them. They moved along existing trade routes into regions that had never seen a European face. The Inca emperor died in an epidemic before he had ever met a Spaniard. The civil war over his succession is a large part of why a few hundred men could topple an empire. Cities emptied before any outsider arrived to write down what had happened there. Explorers pushed inland, found abandoned towns, and assumed the land had always been empty. Estimates vary, but many researchers put the population decline at 70 to 90%. Across a century, in some regions, that is 9 out of every 10 people. So far, every entry has been slow. Years, decades, a century. The last 2 arrived in months. Number 2, Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, 1347. Ships arrive in Sicily carrying a disease nobody in Europe has a name for. Within 4 years, it had crossed the entire continent. It killed a third to a half of everyone in its path. In some towns, far more than that. And it was fast. Someone who felt fine in the morning could be gone within days. Nobody knew what caused it, so every explanation was on the table. Bad air, planetary alignments, divine punishment, poisoned wells. That last one led to attacks on Jewish communities across Europe. blamed with no evidence at all. Doctors could offer nothing. Priests died at the same rate as everybody else. Some people fled to the countryside. Others locked their doors and waited it out. Whole villages simply stopped existing and were never resettled. Europe had also just come through decades of famine and failed harvests, so the plague arrived into a population that was already weakened and underfed. And here is the part that makes it so much worse. It never actually left. It came back roughly every 10 to 20 years for the next 300 years. Every generation grew up knowing it would probably return within their lifetime. Europe's population did not recover to 1347 levels until the 1500s. 200 years, just to get back to where you started. But it did change one thing, almost by accident. With so few workers left alive, the survivors could suddenly demand better pay. Serfdom in Western Europe began to break apart because labor had become precious. Wages rose. Ordinary people ate better than they had in centuries. It is the strangest fact on this list. The plague left the survivors better off, which is not much comfort if you were not one of them. Which brings us to number 1, and it is not a century or a decade, it is 1 year. In 2018, a Harvard historian was asked to name the worst year to be alive. His answer was not 1347 and not 1945, it was 536. In the spring of 536, a fog appeared over Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. It was not weather, it did not burn off, and it did not move on. A Byzantine writer recorded that the sun gave light without brightness, like the moon. It stayed that way for 18 months. Summer temperatures across Europe fell by as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius. It became the coldest decade in more than 2,000 years. In China, officials recorded snow falling in August. Crops failed across the entire northern hemisphere at the same time. Irish records mention years without bread. Famine spread through Europe and Asia together. In Peru, the Moche civilization was hit by drought and began to come apart. In Scandinavia, settlements were abandoned, and huge amounts of gold were buried as offerings. That is what people do when they believe the sun is dying, and nobody alive had the faintest idea why. We only worked it out very recently. Researchers drilled ice cores out of glaciers in Switzerland and Greenland. Trapped in the ice was a layer of volcanic ash, dated to early 536. An enormous eruption, probably in Iceland, had thrown a veil of ash across the hemisphere, and then it happened again in 540, and again in 547. 3 huge eruptions in 11 years, with no chance to recover in between. Then, in 541, into a freezing, starving, exhausted population, plague arrived. It is called the Plague of Justinian, and it is the same bacterium as the Black Death. It reached Constantinople in 542. And the city was completely overwhelmed. It returned in wave after wave for the next 200 years. The Roman Empire's last serious attempt to put itself back together collapsed with it. And the ice cores suggest recovery did not really begin until around 640. So, why does 536 win? Because every other entry is one catastrophe. 536 was all of them at once. The weather failed, the harvests failed, the economy failed, and then the plague came. There was nowhere to run because it was happening everywhere at the same time, and nobody knew anything. No cause, no name, no end date, no reason to think it would ever stop. Because what makes 536 unbeatable is not the cold, and it is not the hunger. It is that they simply watched the sun go dim and waited to find out whether it came back. Subscribe for more history, explained one stick figure at a time. See you next time.